Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. I'm trying a different camera cut, I guess. A different way this video is recorded, just so that way not as much of the background is caught. I would have liked to have recorded a video much earlier, but I decided when I was reorganizing things in here to create more room for books in my bookshelves, I decided it'd be fun to dislocate my knee and then, well, it popped itself back in, but still, I've been laid up for about a week or so. Because it put itself back in, I got mobile a lot quicker than I expected. So, yes, apparently I can hurt myself even when organizing my bookshelves. So I'm special. But what really makes me feel happy and I guess special this time around is I think I mentioned this last time. I had finished last video I made. I think I'd finished the book that was on Akhenaten and Nefertiti. I think that was called when I think it was just called When Akhenaten and Nefertiti Were Gods on Earth, or something like that. I think it was a Darnleys. Don't quote me on that, but it was a married couple who wrote that. So I hadn't liked that book, but I was excited at the time because I was going to start Pharaohs of the Sun by Guy de la Beauvoir. So I did start that, and let me just double check to make sure my sound's on. Yes, it is. I do not feel like recording another video that will not have sound on it. So I did start this, and I actually managed to, when did I start this? I'm just looking at the calendar that's behind y'all. Actually, if anyone's interested, it is a Lord of the Rings calendar, and it has Then Fingon rode against him as the picture, and he's shooting an arrow at a dragon. So, for anyone who finds that imagery happy and exciting, I'm not taking the calendar down. That would just too much effort. But anyhow, I'm just trying to look at my calendar and see if I think I started it early in the month. So it's taken me a few weeks to finish this. Really had to push to get it done, not because it wasn't enjoyable. I absolutely love this book. But the book is, including footnotes, glossary, and index, it's 549 pages. Now, although I did not, look at the acknowledgments or list of illustrations or the index, I did go and read. I pretty much read all the endnotes. Whenever an endnote would pop up, I would go and check it out, because something with Guy de Beauvoir, well, there's a couple things with Guy de Beauvoir, but one of the things I enjoy with Guy de Beauvoir, well, first of all, I enjoy the fact that right at the get-go, he says that he is going to try to be as objective as possible because he finds this is something sorely lacking among Egyptologists, particularly when it comes to this period of time. Egyptologists tend to pick a theory and then try to twist the evidence or mildly shape the evidence to fit that theory. And he wants to present all the theories, but not use the evidence to point to one theory or another. He will only emphasize that a theory perhaps is more likely if the evidence appears to support that theory more than another one. But he made a really big effort to be as objective as possible. So that, right from the start, really was an improvement over the previous book I read on ancient Egypt and this time period. Okay, so then, did I introduce myself at the beginning? Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. If I did not say that at the start, I can't remember. That was too long ago. It had to have been like a whole 5 minutes. Anyway, as I was saying, so the other thing besides the objectivity that I enjoyed, or I have enjoyed in this book, I will probably be keeping this book upstairs where I can access it because I do see myself rereading this some point in the future. But I enjoy what I call scholarly snark. He takes just like these little pot shots at fellow Egyptologists and their lack of objectivity, just like here and there. And he has some in the text that's pretty good, but man, some of the greatest snark is in the endnotes. So besides getting, actually some really good information in the endnotes, you also get some really, fun little snark in there. So yes, I do enjoy an intellectual snark. And I'll pull out at least one of the examples in a moment. Also, something that I really enjoyed is he makes magnificent uses of his endnotes. I mentioned in the previous book on ancient Egypt how I disapproved how the couple would not fully support their arguments within the text and would only do the barest of support in the endnotes. Now, what Guide to Bedwayar does quite well is, if you don't read the endnotes, you will still have the argument that makes sense. It will still follow logically. You won't feel like you're missing something if you do not read the endnotes. You will have a richer experience if you read the endnotes. But you go from A to B to C to D still logically when you're reading just the main text. Which the previous book, it felt like they jumped from A to D with nothing in between, and they're just like, we'll take it as our word, 'cause we said so. Whereas Guide to Bedwayar is like, okay, this is what things look like now. This theory could be it, that theory could be it, we don't really know, but here's everything. And this is, what potentially could be the more likely theory, although it could still be this. And that's just in the main text. If, however, you go to the endnotes, besides getting some awesome snark, you will also get not only like, okay, you can find it in this scholarly work, whenever possible, he also provides website links, YouTube links. He doesn't expect you just to take his word for it. He's like, if you want to see for yourself, take a look here. If you want to go and see 3D interactive tours of different tombs, here's a link. And I actually went and I took a look at, it was an interactive tour, 3D interactive tour of I's tomb and of Horemheb's, and I'm probably mispronouncing both of those terribly. So the last two pharaohs of the 18th dynasty, I got to go and do a 3D interactive tour of both of their tombs based on a link that he had provided to, I think it's Osiris. Hold on, I'll tell you guys. It's a great site. Let's see, it's gotta be toward the end of the endnotes. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it's osirisnet.net. So when you go to osirisnet.net, it will take you to a front page. It shows you like all these different places you can go. And if you hit the area that says tombs, it'll show you that you have you can look at images of tomb artwork, or you can go on interactive tours, 3D interactive tours. And like I mentioned, two of them are from the 18th dynasty, I and Horemheb, who, again, they question whether or not he's 18th or 19th dynasty. But yeah, it was a great source, and I wouldn't have been aware of it if not for this book. So I thoroughly enjoyed that, and if I hadn't been a bit on a crunch to try to finish this before the end of the month, I probably would have went and looked at a lot more of those links, because I really appreciate it when an author makes it possible for me to double check his sources should I choose to do so. So that I really appreciated. Now for the Snark. Let me see. Oh, another thing I appreciated. He did not make the mistake that really bugged me about the previous authors, where they basically said, well, there's nothing physically wrong with Akhenaten. Obviously, it was just artwork, because it was just artwork. And they pointed to some changes in the artwork previous, but it felt like a flat argument to me. It felt like they didn't provide enough evidence. What I liked that Guy de Bevoyard did here is he mentioned, there have been some changes, and there's been some precedent, a little bit of precedent in the past for artistic changes reflecting a theological view. But there is also evidence based on skeletal remains and even busts, or even pre-Amarna busts or statues that Akhenaten did actually potentially have, and his heirs potentially have, this deformation, just not to the exaggerated sense that you saw in the artwork. And I'm like, okay, that is the middle ground I thought there was. He mentioned the characteristics that still could have pointed to some of the things that Bob Breyer mentioned. You could still possibly looking at something like a Marfan's, even if it wasn't as exaggerated as represented in the Amarna artwork. So Guy de Bevoyard just hit that middle ground that just seemed like it made more sense. He did acknowledge that artwork was likely to be a thing, but so really appreciate that about him. Okay, so this is one of the Snark sections in the end notes. So he's talking about Smenkare, Smenkare. I'm just going to say Smenkare because I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He is supposed to be, there's not a whole lot of evidence for him except for a name here or there. But he is supposed to be the husband of Meritaten, who was the daughter of Akhenaten and Smenkare's wife before Smenkare passed, and then the pharaoh whom some believe to be Nefertiti. A lot of people are leaning towards this being Nefertiti taking on Smenkare's throne name, but feminizing it. Some people want to say it's Meritaten, but there's not as much evidence for it, especially since Meritaten's also mentioned as, is still mentioned as the great wife of this same person, of this next pharaoh with the feminized throne name. And he goes into reasons why someone might be mentioned as great wife without it actually being a spousal relationship, about it being about, just want to make sure my sound's still on, more about the theological reasons. So he goes into that far more better than I can here. But that also hits what I thought, that, again, the previous book just tended to jump to conclusions and be like, this is it, 'cause we said so, hence it is. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so this is the end note I was looking for. Both support the case for Nefertiti and Smenkare being the same person, an idea that goes back to the work of Samson in the 1970s and 1980s. See her 1977 and 1982 papers. Wilkinson, 2010-98, says, it is more likely that Smenkare was Nefertiti's third manifestation, offering no explanation for why she felt the need to change her identity on multiple occasions. Anyone reading more widely will rapidly discover that this version is flatly contradicted by many other Egyptologists. It is, incidentally, a passing curiosity that no one apparently has proposed Smenkhare was an alter ego of Akhenaten's, giving the apparently endless speculation Smenkhare has provided. So just a little bit of snark underneath there. The other one that I loved was actually in text. Here it is. So they're discussing the identification of the body in KV55. So that's one of the tombs. Okay. The techniques used to estimate age of death are notoriously prone to major error for a variety of reasons, including the lack of any controls in ancient populations. These techniques do not name or identify individuals either. They have been demonstrated to be prone to significant error when a blind study is conducted on bodies of known age, specified on coffin plates, from burials in the crypt of Christ Church, Spitalfields in London. No investigation of the KV55 body, which includes examination of the bones, for example, the fusion of the epiphyses and teeth, has led to agreement. Since many Egyptologists are disinclined to accept any of these unpalatable truths, except where to do so allows them to refute someone else's theory, the result has been a ceaseless and wholly unresolvable controversy about the KV55 body and other human remains from this period. And I was like, darn, man, shots fired. Love it. So yeah, it's probably fairly subtle, but I love it. It's just these little across the bow shots where he's just like, yeah, guys, I see how biased you are, and it makes you look and sound ridiculous. So I do love it, and I have several of his books waiting for me when the Historathon is done. I intend to read, I have a couple of his books on Roman Britannia. I actually think I might have 3 of them. Because I guess it's an area of particular interest for him. That's great, because that's an area of particular interest for me. And I had not read into it as much as I wanted to this quarter, so I am looking forward to reading them because I have thoroughly enjoyed this book. I loved every minute of it. I wish I had started earlier in the quarter, so that way I could have not rushed through it. I could have just read it as much at my own pace as I could have liked, looked at all the footnotes. I mean, I looked at all the endnotes, sources, gone and followed all the websites. As it was, I thoroughly enjoyed. He has a great little appendix in here where he gives you a nice little who's of non-royalty. He gives you just some pronouncing transliterated Egyptian. Well, that could have been helpful at some points. Timeline of events, which is nice. List of 18th dynasty kings, but also Manetho's list of 18th dynasty kings, which is the one that's kind of like, well, first of all, that's the one that skips Akhenaten, Smenkhare, Neferraten, Tutankhamun, It just basically goes from Amenhotep III to Horemheb. Like, Horemheb reigns like 30, I think it's 30 years they have him reigning because, or is it 30 years? It might have been 50 years they have him reign. Let's see, 36 years because they can't possibly accept the heretic part of the dynasty or anything that even has a whiff of the heretic part of the dynasty. So, a lot of good stuff in here. Highly recommend it. Don't, if at all possible, take all the time to read the endnotes, follow up the sources. It's not integral to getting an enjoyable read, but it gives you that much more of an enjoyable read. So yes, that's that. I am uncertain whether or not I will actually get to finish The Eye of the Beholder before the quarter's over. I'm kind of at the point where I'm not sure if I want to push. So I'll read it. It's got nice little short sections. I took a brain break today. Well, actually, I kind of took a brain break yesterday, too. I read a 1920s. Well, they marked it as a 1920s era mystery book. It wasn't written during 1920s, but it was set during the 1920s. It's called The Ladies' Column. Read it on Kindle. I don't particularly like it when murder mysteries, when you don't have your first murder happen to like halfway through the book, and it feels like you're very slowly building up to any sort of mystery whatsoever. I mean, the characters were enjoyable enough. Certain things were rushed towards the end. I mean, when you hit the murder halfway through the book, things are going to be more rushed. So it could have been better done. I enjoyed the time with the characters. I'm not in a rush to read any of the other books in the series, but if you want to have some enjoyable characters and you're not terribly concerned about when the murder happens or anything about the murder, you just want some interesting time with some fun 1920s characters. What is fun about it, and I will give it this, is it gives you the really, really good feel for flapper culture, I guess. And I'm assuming they're correct because I'm actually not very well versed in the flapper culture. I'm guessing the slang is correct, but if it is indeed correct, they go into the slang, they go into how even someone a few years older could really be seen as out of touch. It's a very interesting cultural insight if the writer did in fact get the culture correct, which I'm assuming they did. So that would probably be the biggest draw in my mind to the book, and not so much the mystery, because the mystery almost felt like it was tacked on. But yeah, I mean, it was an enjoyable enough book. I put it as a 3 on Goodreads and Lovecrafts, just simply because I am used to murder mysteries having, I don't know, the murders a lot earlier. But yeah, so that's that. I haven't really read much of this because of, having done such a huge push to get Pharaohs of the Sun done. I just needed to relax for a bit, even though this is a book that I want to read. My big part of my relaxation today was actually I went ahead and grabbed my Silmarillion and read a bit of this. And it's been a while since I read this, my very lovely copy of the Silmarillion. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to make sure I have my Tolkien companion ready to go so that I'm not flipping back and forth to find people, which, was helpful. It was nice to have an idea, because sometimes I forget, particularly since it's been a while since I've read it, and there's so many names, some of them which are quite similar. So it was nice to be able to, oh yeah, who was that? Or what was that? Even if I just read a couple of pages earlier, like I did when they're talking about Melkor's little place he built underground, like his little hidey place, when, they're all off celebrating Tulkas's wedding, and they're off doing their thing, and he makes his little dark hidey place, and then he goes and destroys the light of the it's not the two trees, it's the lights on either side of Arda, and I can't remember what they're called, but you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I read just before what the name of that was, and then I turned the page, I'd forgotten, so I looked it up in the book, and it's like, oh yeah, totally just read that 5 seconds ago. So it's good for the slightly senile to have the Tolkien companion with them when looking through the Silmarillion. And I did get a bit through. I finished, let's see. So I'm in the section, the Quenta Silmarillion, and I finished chapter 1, which is of the beginning of days. Oh no, you had to go past that? Yeah, I went past. I just did the beginning of days, because I know the next section is going to cover Aules, I think it's Aules, creation of the dwarves. So I wanted to do this when I could focus on it. I was about to go and do something else, so I was like, oh, I'll get back to that, because this is something I've heard a lot about, and I just wanted to enjoy it. Because I watch quite a bit of TolkienTube. So I know what to expect, but I wanted to take my time enjoying that. Do not fall. That's going to fall. Okay. There will not be editing, by the way, so unfortunately you will be seeing me flip through pages. Okay, so I also made a point, since I was trying to relax, I was like, okay, I'm going to also read some more of the Sword of Shannara. And I have been reading the first one in the trilogy, which I think actually is called the Sword of Shannara. Yeah, so that's the first one in the trilogy. And I actually got a decent, I think when I last read it, I was like a page 30, 33, something like that. And I've gotten to page 77, so I've gotten, the parallels between this and the Fellowship of the Ring, yeah, I would say Fellowship of the Ring, and I don't think so much, you might have a little bit throughout the trilogy, but the first part of the Sword of Shannara really gives a feeling of the Fellowship, and you even have things that make me think of, getting lost in the forest by, I'm sorry, I'm having so much trouble thinking. By the Brandy books, getting lost in that forest, and how, that forest is malevolent and kind of wants them all dead. That there's a section in here that makes me think that, and I just finished that section. It's not a one-on-one throughout this book that's like, oh yeah, that's a part of that for Fellowship. But every once in a while, something will happen to, like, that was what his influence was. Because Terry Brooks admits that Tolkien was a huge influence on him, and that's most evident in his first book. I feel like as you go on further in his series, you see more of a difference. My favorite of his, actually, the next two books in the series are pretty close to tied for my favorite, but I think that the second one pushes out the third one. Okay, so you have the Sword of Shannara, which is a great starting point, and, is the one that is definitely most influenced by the Fellowship of the Ring and by Tolkien. And the other books, while you still have Tolkien-esque feelings to it, you can see where he started really getting a feeling of his own writing, a feeling of his own creativity and what to do with it. And I really, really love the Elfstones of Shannara. I love the main character. He's probably one of my favorites, Will Omsford. Great guy. And I look forward to finishing the Sword of Shannara and getting to Will Omsford in the Elfstones. And then the Wish Song of Shannara. They have a whole dynamic with the characters that I thoroughly enjoy. It's, not quite as high in my ranking as Elfstones of Shannara, but it's pretty close. Other than these three books, I've read his Heritage of Shannara. I want to say it's a 4-part series. I can't remember, though. I know it's not just 3. It's a multiple book series, because you have the Elf Queen. Let's see, I can't remember all the titles of that. I only remember the Elf Queen for certain. Well, you might have the Druid. I think there's something with the Druid in one of the titles. But there's got to be at least 2 other books in that series, Heritage of Shannara. Oh, one of them is called The Children of Shannara, I think. Or is it The Children of Shannara and then Heritage? The series might be The Children of Shannara. Hold on. That might be what it's called. because it's been a while since I've read. I don't like it as much as the earlier books, even though it was probably, I want to say I read it first, because that was actually my mom's favorite. And this series, particularly the Children of Shannara, or the Heritage of Shannara, whatever it is, that's the series was really what first made me see the difference, just from reading something in high school to reading as an adult, how differently you see characters that I thought as being so mature and so much older than the others. Once I came back and read it, not as a high schooler, but as an adult, like, quite a range down the line, like 10 years down the line, reading it again, I was like, oh, he's actually quite young and immature. He's kind of throwing a temper tantrum. But it took the space of some years for me to really see from a different perspective how this character was not nearly as mature as I thought he was. So, yeah, it is the Heritage of Shannara series, and that includes... Okay, let's see if it tells me. Okay. Okay, so you've got the Druid of Shannara, the Elf Queen of Shannara, and the Talismans of Shannara. Oh, is it only 3? I thought there was 4. Okay, so yeah. Druid of Shannara, Elf Queens of Shannara, Talismans of Shannara. Oh no, there we go. Okay, I wasn't wrong. It was 4. Okay, so Scions of Shannara, Druid of Shannara, Elf Queen of Shannara, Talismans of Shannara. So it is a 4-part series. It's been a long time since I've read it. One thing that Shannara does quite well, and I've harped on this with other videos, I believe, in the past, where other fantasy authors sometimes fail, and I always pick on poor David Eddings with this, is where sometimes there might be well-crafted characters, but there's 2 character voices, and that's it, like a male character voice and a female character voice, and then they all sound alike. And after a while, it's distracting because they don't feel different. You can't tell from one moment to next who's speaking because they don't have that much of a difference in how they express themselves. One thing that I think that Terry Brooks does well is that since he's dealing with generations of family, and I mean, you have generations of the Highlanders, so that means Menions. In this book, it's Menion, but you have what is his name in? What's the Highlander's name in? They always have a name that begins with M. So I forget the name of the one in Heritage of Shannara, and I never remember the one from the Elfstones of Shannara. The only book that kind of doesn't follow in this, these 2 series, I haven't read much past these 2 series, just because the Shannara, the whole vast universe of Shannara, there's so many books that I just kind of gave up keeping up with them all. I didn't enjoy Juril Shannara. Was it Juril Shannara? It might have been actually called First King of Shannara. It's about First King of Shannara. Yeah, I want to say it's about Juril Shannara. That might not be the correct. I know the name is Juril, Jerle. I just can't remember if it said of Shannara on it. I think it was First King of Shannara. Didn't enjoy that one very much. It suffered from what I consider a common flaw when someone's writing a prequel, is they try to, and this happens, I think, for the best authors a lot of times even, is they look at stuff they've already written and they're like, okay, I need to make a reference to that thing. Whereas they wouldn't have done that if they'd been writing that in order. If they'd been writing in order, you would have been building on, and then that thing would have been the result of having already built off of something previous. But a lot of times when you're retrospectively writing something that came before, you feel like you need to tie in the loose ends. But they aren't really loose ends because sometimes things aren't going to all come together in a nice, tidy bow. Maybe, this character just never came into the path of that character at this point, and that's okay. But sometimes prequels can just feel too neat, too artificial sometimes. So I think that was really my biggest issue with the first King of Shannara. Not too much I had a little bit of trouble connecting to the main character, but first King of Shannara really suffered from prequel syndrome, in my opinion. Not everyone else might agree with that. I heard that the Isle Witch series was really good, even though I never read it. I just have read the Sword of Shannara trilogy and the Heritage of Shannara quadrilogy. Anyway, what I noticed has been the strength of those two series of books is that you are following families. So not only do you have stories being passed down from family to family and quests being passed down from family to family, like you think about Gandalf, who consistently seems to pick on the Bagginses. Think about it, though. Now you have multiple generations, not just like a Bilbo Frodo thing, but you start with generation 1, and you got generation 2, and you got generation 3, and you're going down the line, where it's just like, okay, these Shannara guys, they just cannot, these Omsfords, they just cannot get a break, anyone with the Shannara bloodline, now the Omsford bloodline. Now it's like, if you're a Highlander, you might as well, part of the royal family of the Highlanders, you might as well give up. That you're cursed now too. So it's really, it gives you that feeling of family. It also gives you that kind of feeling, and you see this with Tolkien's work anyway, and this is probably part of why you see it, because Shannara is highly influenced by Tolkien, but this idea of fate. So this family is tied to by fate to always be an integral part of this world still being safe, of standing against the powers of darkness. This family, that is their fate, that is their doom, to use a Tolkien word. So I think that's where, if you look at things from a Tolkien perspective, you can see like, okay, that works in this world works very well with the Tolkien world from many different ways. So I do enjoy that. You do have a lot of the same kind of group of people coming together. The only point where you have a little bit of a difference, where it's not always like an Omsford, a druid, an elf of some sort, and Highlander. Highlander is usually very important in there. The only book where you don't have all of the elements of, everything being passed down to the family, there's a couple other ones I don't want to bring in, because even though they pass from all the books, or at least both the series, I don't want to give away those elements, even though they do cross over, because of family and, fate or doom or whatever of those families. But the one book that's sort of held apart from all the others in that way is the second book of this series, which is the Elfstones of Shannara. And I like to think that it's because Elfstones is kind of like the bridge between the first book and all the others. I partially wonder if you would not have seen necessarily the rest of the story go in the direction it does for the other generations if Will Omsford's path had not gone the way it had. And I guess you could say that with any time you're dealing with any of these events, but specifically with Will Omsford and how his relationship with the magic, and that affects everyone from generations to come. in a very significant way. So I wonder if, even if it wasn't a conscious thought in Terry Brooks's mind, I do feel like this book is kind of that bridge from Shay at the very start to something beyond Shay could have ever imagined seeing in his generations of his family. So yeah, I just I find that to be interesting. Anyway, I look forward to reading this on and off. I am going to try to, while being focused on reading history in quarter two, which it's actually one of my favorite eras to read. It's medieval history, and I tend to focus on medieval English history because that has been my favorite era for a long period of time. That being said, I kind of don't want to be reading just history during this period of time, so I'm probably going to every once in a while pick up Sword of Shannara, pick up the Silmarillion, maybe even pick up Emma, which I have over here, and just, allow myself, maybe I'll say like Saturdays or Sundays, that is my, day to kind of disengage my brain and pull it somewhere else for a bit so I can just refresh myself again to go on and read the history. Because I love history, but I also can see where, like right now, I don't even want to pick up my Eye of the Beholder, which talks about disability in the Greco-Roman world. I don't even want to look at that right now because I've just been so hardcore reading history. I just want to go and live in Shannara, or actually Shannara's not the name of the place. Shannara is the name of the Snark is the name of the family, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it's Shannara. No, I'm not sure. I'm going to say in Shannara because I can't remember. Well, Shady Vale. There. I'm going to say Shady Vale because that's the name of where the family's from. So, I am going to live in Shady Vale and that general area for a while. Or I'm going to live in Arda and just sort of hang out there, see where I feel like it's tomorrow. Hopefully I can get back into the Greco-Roman world. But yeah, I just need a little bit of a brain break. Anyway, thank you for joining me for this very disjointed video. It's very unlikely to be edited because I just don't feel like it. So I hope you managed to last through this lack of editing. I'm going to finish my cup of tea and then head to bed. Alrighty, y'all have a blessed day. God bless. Bye.